What is going on, YouTube? I am Prepper Princess, the author of Living on Almost Nothing. If you are interested in purchasing one of my books, I will go ahead and leave the link down in the description box below. Today, I want to talk about, is Prepper Princess still even a prepper? I guess I'm one of the original OGs of the prepping community. I was here 7 years ago, and believe it or not, this channel started as a money-saving channel, and I was getting no traffic, zero traffic. Started as a money-saving channel. I made probably 10 videos, and then I talked about like your neighbors during a collapse, and it got like 17,000 views, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. People are actually watching and listening to me. I got my very first YouTube check. That was back when the requirements to get paid on YouTube were much, much lower. You didn't have to have a certain amount of hours or subscribers. You just needed content. So I was pushing out the content. I got my first check for $700, but it was like 3 or 4 months worth of YouTube because back then I didn't know how AdSense worked. So I didn't know that I had to do certain steps. And then I finally went through that step. I got my first check for $700, and let me tell you something. I needed that money so bad. I talk about money on this channel and how I have invested since I was 18. There are poor people and rich people, and a ton of poor people always ask me, why don't you just take money out of your savings to pay for your remodel in your kitchen, or why don't you just do this to do that and take money out of here and do that? I don't think you all understand that my retirement accounts, my 401k, my Roth IRAs, and my brokerage account, once the money is in there, it is no longer mine. I do not consider it mine until I can no longer work, because I am a workaholic. So that's a huge difference between the rich and the poor. It is no longer my money. Now, back then, I was working a $10 an hour job, and I had a dog, my Simba, who I can't even talk about to this day without crying, so I'm going to keep this part brief, was going through medical issues, and I could not afford the vet bill. Even with a paid-off house, her vet bills were amounting to probably $2,000 a month, and I had to start doing YouTube in order to pay for her health care, her vet bills, her medications, her tests. And she ultimately ended up dying of Cushing's disease, and that's all I can say about that before I start getting emotional. So that's okay. I got Nala. She's the reincarnation of Simba. So it started off as a money-saving channel with nobody watching, and then I moved into prepping briefly for probably a couple years. And I've always, after my house was paid off, there was just sort of this progression into prepping. It's like, okay, well, I've got that taken care of. I've got my retirement hopefully taken care of. And then what's next? So it's like, okay, start prepping. I spent thousands over time, $100 a month or something. And back then food was a lot cheaper, but I spent thousands of dollars on freeze-dried food. And I couldn't afford a solar generator or a sun oven. Couldn't afford any of that. I built my own sun oven out of wood and like tin foil and stuff like that, just so I would have something in case the world collapsed, because that's what naturally went on in my head, is that the world's going to collapse, because I grew up in poverty and I was going through poverty at that time, if that makes sense. So I grew up, not poverty, lower middle income. So, and people talk about my old house in Livermore, California, which is now worth $1 million. It's $1 million home. But back in 1985, when we moved there, nobody knew where Livermore was. It was a cow town. It was literally just farms. But it has gentrified and gotten huge, and it's part of the Bay Area now. And remember, 1985, internet wasn't a thing. So there was no Silicon Valley. There was just San Francisco. And at the time, it was mostly banking stuff. So I naturally progressed into prepping. So I spent thousands of dollars on freeze-dried food. And then I started, I remember begging this one company. It was a solar tube, a solar cooking tube. It was like just a tube. It wasn't a a solar oven or a solar cooker. And I begged this company. I was like, look, I've got like 40,000 subscribers. Could you please send me one of these? It was like a $69 sun oven or solar tube. They were like, yeah, we'll send you one. I was like, yes. And they sent me one. I was like, now I have something to cook with after the collapse. Yay. Never thought of anything else. I was just like, yes. And then I was like, okay, well, and then I hit like 60,000 subscribers, and I was like, there's no way anybody's going to send me like a generator. So I called up Champion gas generators, and they sent me one, and I was like, oh my gosh, people are actually giving me stuff that I would have never been able to afford if I were not on YouTube. There's no way I would have been able to afford it. And your mind, as you get older, you get wiser, you start learning new things and all this stuff. And now, I'm on YouTube almost around 300,000 subscribers, and I can just call a company and they'll give it to me. And trust me, I do not take that for granted. I mean, I've probably got 10 solar generators in the shed, and my house came with solar. So I don't need them unless the electricity goes out, which it hasn't yet. And I am in a really, really great place right now. But I stopped talking about the prepping, because it just brought negativity into my life. It brought the anxious people. It brought the doomsdayers, the doomsayers, the threateners. It brought people showing up to my house. People started calling me and texting me. It just pretty much turned into a whole bunch of lack of privacy and stalking from these people who are already mentally unstable and have anxiety issues. Because that's what the prepping community is. And you want to be justified in your thought process, so you go onto YouTube and you seek out these places that justify your way of thinking about the apocalypse. Or some people out there actually want the apocalypse to happen, because they're not making it in the real world, and they think that somehow in a dystopian, desolate future, they would somehow become kings of the earth and they'd be okay. Or they just want everyone else to suffer as bad as they have suffered throughout their lives, because they consider themselves victims. So I wanted to get away from that. But am I still a prepper? Well, let me tell you. I've got 10 solar generators. I've got 10 e-bikes, and I've lost count of how many are on the way. I've got communication. I am within a walking distance to a river that has been there for thousands of years. So I don't need water catchment. I can just walk down to the river. And I think that I have food, but the freeze-dried food, oh my gosh, you guys, seriously. I have tried Thrive, Augustin Farms, Mountain House. I've tried pretty much every major brand out there that you can think of. And I am not a picky eater. I have literally eaten like roadkill. Like somebody found some roadkill, a butcher, a friend of mine found some roadkill, cooked it up, and I ate it. It was good. Good stuff. I've eaten snake for breakfast. I've eaten bats. Like I have eaten crazy. I've eaten cockroach chips. Is it cockroach? No, grasshopper. Whatever those chips, protein. They're protein chips made out of like grasshopper protein or something. I don't know. I've eaten some crazy stuff, and I'm not picky. I think that if somebody offers you food, it's what's the word? It's an insult not to accept it. But that food, that freeze-dried food, everything I tasted was inedible. I couldn't eat it. It just tasted like I was chewing on salt. It was horrible. Backpacker's Pantry. Oh my God. You can't eat that stuff. I'm telling you. So and some people are out there are like, I've tried freeze-dried food. It's delicious. I'm like, can you cook? Like rice? Like seriously, it's horrible. I ended up giving it all away because I'm like, in an apocalypse, I would rather die than eat this. This is that bad. So I stopped doing any sort of promotions of those products, the 72-hour emergency kits and stuff like that. And I changed my food preparedness from freeze-dried food that you set it and forget it just in case there's an emergency, to a rotating stock. And people assume that because I got rid of all my freeze-dried food that I'm not a prepper anymore. No, I still have 6 months worth of food. With the freeze-dried, I probably had 2 years. I think I had 2 years worth of food for, I think it was 6 people, which was a lot. But I would much rather, now I live alone and I live too far away from my family to worry about them. I'm still close enough driving distance. I go there in a day and I come home, but I'm not worried about my family anymore. It's up to them. It's up to them to take care of themselves. If they come here, I'll take care of them if they pull their own weight, but they got to pull their own weight. You got to get your own food. You got to go fishing with me. You got to collect water. You got to boil it. You got to do laundry. You got to clean, that sort of thing. Pull your own weight. That's all you got to do. But I'm not doing the freeze-dried food anymore. No way. No way. And I greatly regret spending so much money on that freeze-dried food. When it comes to talking about products on my channel, the solar generators and the e-bikes, those are things that, like, knowing what I know now, okay? Like, back then I didn't know anything about them. Now I feel like I'm pretty moderately, I'm good about, I understand these things. So if I had, let's say I had nothing and I wanted to be prepared, I had nothing. I would start with like a super cheap gas generator and just store 10 gallons of gas that would get me through 2 weeks of keeping my refrigerator cold and watching TV. I'm a TV person. That's where I'd start. Then I would save up my money, and then I would get a solar generator that has that can take in at least 400 watts and discharge at least 2,000 watts. Now, my personal favorite solar product, and I've probably done 30 reviews, 30 or 40. I've gone through like 30 or 40 solar generators. My personal favorite is the Energy Apex. I have never had a problem with them, even when I was in the desert, and they usually max out at 104 degrees. It worked through a storm where we were getting 118 degree temperatures. It worked. Nothing went wrong. It is the most reliable. It doesn't have the highest output or the highest input of any generator out there, but it is the most reliable one I've ever worked with. When it comes to e-bikes, like, knowing what I know now, I would spend money. Knowing what I know now, I would save money. Even if I were low income, I would save money for a solar generator and I would use it. A gas generator is okay if you want just for emergencies, but I'd choose a solar generator over a gas generator because I can use it and diminish my electricity bill to the point where that unit pays for itself. So I would just plug it, and that's what I did. I had that thing in Livermore, I had it in Arizona, and I had the solar going on the roof, and I plugged it into my refrigerator and my living room, my TV. I had the cords going all across. You couldn't even tell that my entire living room and my refrigerator were on solar for like 2 years. My energy bills, they had like a $20 charge just for having it, but my solar bills were, or my electricity bills were like only like $30 or $40 because most of it was used through the solar generator. So it paid for itself. Ultimately, I gave that to somebody in need because I have generators coming in and out all the time, so it's not really a big deal for me. And I have solar on my roof. The house came with it. I didn't pay for it, but so solar generators are great to have as backup. So I don't need to use the generator in my living room and my fridge right now because I already have excess energy from my solar units, and I'm actually going to get a pretty darn big check, probably about $700 from PG&E, because I use less than I make. I use less than I produce in solar. But again, even if I were on a low income, even if I were only making $1,000 a month, I would find a way to save up for a solar generator. Same thing with e-bikes. So if there's ever a collapse, you need transportation. You need electricity, transportation, and communication. Those are the 3 major things. Because you can get into first aid and stuff like that, but if you need an appendix removed, you can't do that with a first aid kit at home. I mean, I wouldn't. So you need communication to get help if if something big happens. But electricity, transportation, communication, those are the big things. So if you have a solar array on your house with backup power and you can power your Tesla, awesome. Good for you. Yeah, I'm not going to buy a car with that much technology until it becomes completely driverless and I can just take a nap in the back seat and it runs completely on solar. That's the next new car I will buy. But until that happens, I'm going to stick with my 98 Camry. But anyway, so backup transportation. E-bikes you can get class 2 or class 3. They go about 20 or they go about 30 miles per hour. Now, you can deck these things out with front and back baskets so that if you are going foraging, picking berries or apples or tomatoes or, cattails, whatever it is that you're picking, because cattails do taste like celery at the bottom. Anyway, so if you're out there, you need something to carry it and if you have an electric bike, you can carry a lot more. Same thing with water. So not a lot of people have the space to store water on their property, but people like me, I have always lived within 10 miles of a lake, stream, or river. So in Livermore, I lived by Lake Del Valle. In Arizona, I lived quarter mile from the Colorado River. Here, where I live now, I'm about 3 miles from the Sacramento River. So I need to be near a water source, but I need transportation to fill up my buckets of water every day. And then I can come in, put it into a 50-gallon barrel, and then, make that last for a week after I've boiled it. But yes, I believe that even if I were poor and on a limited income, I would have an e-bike. Now, I'm not telling you which one yet because I've got a whole bunch of them, and I'm going to make a video on my 2 favorite and my 2 least favorite e-bikes. Once I have like a certain amount of e-bikes, I think I said 10 or 12. I don't know. I have like 90. I have to go out in there and count. I've lost count, honestly. But I do want to do a comparison on my favorite e-bikes, but you already know that the Energy Apex, out of all of the solar generators that I have done reviews on, they are the most reliable, easiest to use, never broke down on me, got me through a storm, blah, 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 blah. And then e-bikes. Okay, that's important. Also, what is important is a way to cook. So you can do it on an open flame. Right now, I don't have a barbecue, so I use a little bonfire thing. It's like a decorative bonfire, but it has a grill on top. So I collect wood when I go on my walks and my hikes with my dogs. I just collect wood into a backpack. I throw it in a pile on the side of the house, and then when it comes time to cook something, I just put it in that little bonfire thing. I stick the grate on top, and I cook by fire. In fact, I have stuff in my fridge right now. I made some pork ribs, and I've got 5 days worth of pork ribs that I cooked on an open fire outside. But there's also the solar oven, the All-American solar oven. I have one of those. I believe that they are overpriced for what they are. But in a all-out collapse where you have to wait 3 to 5 years to get help, because that's how long it would take to get new transformers if the electricity went out, 3 to 5 years, because they're made in South Korea, China, and Germany. So you have to be prepared for 3 to 5 years. That's what you'll need in order for the electricity to come back on in a worst-case scenario. But that would be, the fire would be my first alternative form of transportation. I would use the solar in order to power my food dehydrator. I would be dehydrating a lot of food, making a lot of jerky, doing a lot of fishing. And that's an option. But I think that they are overpriced, but they are the best. And sometimes you get what you pay for. And when I do my e-bike review, you'll actually be surprised that one of the cheapest ones is one of my favorites. And one of the more expensive ones. Anyway, and then when it comes to my least favorite, the most expensive one is my least favorite. We'll get to that. But anyway, so if I were on a low income and I really wanted to be a prepper, I would, and it's pretty much what I do now. And if I were on a low income, I would have a solar generator, I would have an e-bike, and I would have an alternative form of cooking. So if you can't do it on an open fire, you don't have the money for a solar oven, you can buy a single burner that works on propane or butane, whatever. And those are about, I think a camping one is like $30. And then the propane will probably set you back $7 a canister. But for me, when I was living in Arizona, I didn't have the gas turned on forever because I didn't want it to be turned on until my kitchen was finished. And then I finished my kitchen and I was perfectly happy using my sun oven and my single burner, my propane burner. And I didn't want to waste the propane. So I didn't have the gas turned on in my house for like a year and 3 months. Because I simply didn't use it. I just used that single propane burner, and it was actually very easy to use. But those little canisters are like $6 or $7. It's been a while since I've bought them, and I found a lot at the beach. So I have a ton of canisters, and I still have my propane burner, but gas is turned on in this house. But that is an option. So you need a way to cook, and you can do that for free with an open flame, as long as you've got it in a burn barrel or something that is designated for burning. So yes. So am I still a prepper? Yes, I am, but I don't talk about it as much. And also with the crazy stuff that goes on YouTube, I don't want people to know everything that I have. I think that's actually getting dangerous, because people do have people want to flex. They want to brag about all the cool stuff that they have. They really do. And that's just a normal part of nature. Like you want people to understand, like, I have more than you. And it goes back into our DNA, where the weakest link is always the first one to be taken by the predator. And the one who has the most does not consider themselves the weakest link. They are the apex, and then the predator will not go after them. That's just a part of life. That's in our DNA. But for me, I do have self-confidence, and I don't have to prove it. I have nothing to prove to anyone. Nothing. I don't have to prove anything to anyone on YouTube. So I think that it's best not to show what I have, because a lot of the world is becoming unhinged, and there's a lot of mental illness out there, and I don't need people, showing up to my house again, wanting to meet my dogs, or waking me up from a nap, or asking for a selfie. So, I think it's a good idea to keep those things under wraps. But yes, I am still a prepper. I have solar. I have solar backup. I have water and water filtration. I have alternative forms of transportation that go 30 miles per hour. I think one of them actually goes 32 miles per hour. I have a rotating food stock. I have a way to cook my food. And I am currently growing a garden, a non-work garden, a lazy garden. Stuff that you plant and you leave it alone. You plant, you water it until it is mature, and then you just leave it alone. You don't have to do anything, and it just grows food for you. So those are the things that I have as a prepper. I'm also a very good fisher and a very good forager. Those are my major skills in a collapse would be foraging, fishing, and making a house a home. It'll be warm in the winter. It'll be cool in the summer. I find ways to make that happen. And I think that as a woman and as a prepper, those things, and yes, I do believe that men are awesome. And I think that men should be part of any group. And if the man wants to go out and hunt and fish and forage and kill something and drag it back home, it is a woman's job to make the house a home, to make it comfortable, to support, to provide support. And I think that is very undervalued in this day and age. Providing support for those that are part of a group and take care of each other. All right, folks, that is what I've got for today. Yes, I'm still a prepper, even though I don't talk about it very much. Do what you can with what you've got. Prepper Princess out.